Do you smell it? Ah, the winds of a free Rome. But were these winds to blow from the south, what would we smell then? The stink of lacmid animals mixed in with the vile secretions of a usurper. Yes, out there is not only a scum-ridden warhost that has grown weak from overeating our own supplies, but a lacmid army as well. Yes, it's a matter of freedoms really, isn't it? The people want freedom from the raids, and the Senate's bald-faced man didn't lift a finger. Then some random child from Constance's defiant little subject empire appears from nowhere. Tranquilius is suddenly just fodder for the funereal priests, and this Eutropius Arintheus puts on his very cloak and armour so that he may disappoint the people instead. But they were free still to think, free to talk and beg and plead until the Senate finally said, "You know, I think we rather should attack the enemy in our midst, shouldn't we? Sounds like the sort of thing a state is wont to do. That's why you want to stick with me, fellows. I'm going to take that half-barbarian child and return him to the gutter, and I'm going to take a sword, a shield, and 2,000 men and stick good Roman steel through the belly of a writhing, drooling, plague-ridden lacmid whoreson. And don't worry, when the Senate makes me rich, I'll remember those who helped me, who followed me, who saw that to be a good person is to be victorious. Right, enough of this. If the men aren't ready by next watch, I'll have them flogged. Hello there and welcome back to Fields of Mars. Last time we abandoned our campaign in Anatolia, pulling both Septimus and Constans back and giving up Nicomedia with the war, ultimately achieving nothing. With Constans freed up, he went on an adventure to go and attack Alexandria on the other side of the Sassanid territory. The battle looked like it could be difficult, but he used his navy to basically wipe out most of the Sassanid army inside the town before making full landings, and we ended up with a pretty easy battle. So now we're just in the results of that, and you can see the losses on our side pretty minor compared to 2 stacks lost for the Sassanids and a major city being taken. I have the option to liberate it and create a new Roman faction called Egypt, but we're not going to do that. We're going to move in and occupy it. That was Constance's goal here, and with our army in such good condition, we're in a really safe position to defend against any potential Sassanid counterattacks here, and that isn't exactly unlikely given what the Sassanids are like. Plus, as you can see, we're surrounded by hostile territory, Garamantians to the west, more Sassanids down to the south throughout the rest of Egypt, and Lachmids and Sassanids to the east. Here in the next turn now, I actually sent the fleet out to go and scout to see what was going on over to the east, and we can see there is a Sassanid stack nearby, but it's actually taking attrition, and that suggests that taking Alexandria has dipped the Sassanid food supply below 0, so they're now going to take attrition on their armies, which will make them very unlikely to actually bother attacking us. So this is much more than I expected to actually come of this raid on Alexandria. I thought we'd just get immediately swarmed with stacks and end up leaving, but this is good news if that is indeed what has happened. Now with Eutropius, I've moved him back to continue standing off against the Lachmids at very close order, so I can attack at any moment. But he is now going to be replaced, unfortunately for him, with Marcus Pera, a higher level Senate general, who right now is just leading a garrison to improve public order in Italia. Now it's going to be time for him to come and join the scene by taking over the main army in Sicily to lead this assault against the Lachmids. The Huns are still up to no good, but basically not interfering with us right now. They seem to be content to just attack our Illyrian allies, and I'm content to let them do that, because of course they're not going to be damaging us in the process, and they seem to just be ignoring all of our territory, which is very good of them. Now we get an extremely interesting offer from the Western Roman Empire. They want to arrange a marriage with Pompilia Flavius Maro, who you might remember is actually Aurelianus' daughter, and they're proposing that she marry Constans. She was of course married to the Western Roman Emperor, who I guess has died, caused her to become a widow, and now they're proposing that they marry her back to our faction leader, despite the fact that she is his niece. So at first I thought we probably shouldn't do this, but then I completely reversed my decision and realised we probably should do this because it's the ancient world after all. This is exactly the sort of thing that people would go in for. So there we go. Aurelianus may not be happy with that arrangement, but at least Constans now has a new wife. Now jumping back over to that fleet that was scouting the Sassanids, I realised what I might be able to do here is actually just attack some of these coastal settlements and use this infinite ammo crossbow ship exploitative tactic to take down the garrison without needing much of an actual landing force to eventually take the settlement. So first I'm just looking around and scouting these different settlements to see if any of them are particularly vulnerable to raiding. The answer is not really. They all seem to have full stack garrisons, but I wanted to try this out at least, so I'm going to come and besiege or blockade this one where indeed a full stack garrison with tons of shielded units and some archers will need to contend with. But I didn't feel like going through this little exploit battle right now. First we're going to do some real tactics because Constans has gained a nice opportunity against the Garamantians. We can attack their settlement just to the west of Alexandria here, and they had a full fleet docked here. And this means by forcing a settlement battle we may be able to get the entire fleet to land and then fight the crews in a regular land battle, which will make them of course much weaker. So this could be a key opportunity to make our own fleets much safer and deny the Garamantians a very powerful looking navy indeed. So as things got started, I've split my forces to hang around the beaches just to watch what the enemy do. I immediately realised that's going to be a problem because this enemy fleet has tons of siege ships who will just shoot my men on the beach rather than land. So we do actually need to just run away as the battle gets started and try and put enough distance between us and the coast that the enemy will have to land to do anything with their ships and will thus feel obligated to do so. They almost look like they were going to land these ships over here who came off separate from the main fleet. So I've actually kept a few units close to the beach there just in case they land. Of course if they do land we want to rush them as soon as possible so they don't just run inside the town where they'll have a little bit of an easier time on the defense. But what I realized was happening is that their entire set of siege ships was just going to come over to bombard the couple of units that would be in range over there. So basically we do need to run away completely and just wait for a while to force the AI to decide to eventually land everything. So let's get waiting. Do you remember how I used to say that Constans must have forgotten about me, given his indifference to the Hun menace? Now I'm praying to Jupiter that he has forgotten about me, for if he has not, if he knows what he is doing, then the truth of the matter is that I no longer have an older brother. This is... What manner of humiliation will he not wish on our family, on me specifically? I understand it is not unheard of and that it removes a deal of uncertainty from the affairs of marriage. I could understand it between any others, but not Pompilia, not my Pompilia, and not by the gods above with him. He is a madman and a traitor to his own kin. The only move he has left to make against me is to ask me to pay for her damned dowry. So after a very long wait, the enemy fleet eventually does decide it's going to land everything, so that's going to be great for us. I think they just get impatient, they're not going to wait for us to attack, so they just come and land troops to add to the defense. Some of these guys are actually going to be melee troops, so they will be useful in the defense of the town, and we'll have to be careful trying to get past them. But as we've seen, a lot of the fleet is siege, which means all of this siege crew is going to be added to the enemy's army, and they're going to be completely useless. One of the ships there actually didn't land due to a bit of a traffic jam, so they're going to be still firing at these cavalry as I advance them forwards. I wanted to try and hit these units as they came off the ships just to stop them from forming up or in any way increasing their own strength by being inside the town. Probably don't really need to do this, to be fair, because these units are so weak that they don't really offer any resistance either here or in defense of the settlement, but we're just doing it anyway. And luckily for me, that one siege ship didn't really do much damage to my cavalry. I think they killed a couple of guys in each unit, but overall this is going to kind of work. We're going to take out a handful of enemy units here with these two units of cav. Now with that done, and with me having off camera destroyed the enemy's towers using an onager, the rest of my infantry are going to start thinking about doing something about the enemy settlement. First, I've got these archers raining arrows on these big blobs of enemy defenders. I thought this might actually tempt them to come out and fight me, so I had all my infantry ready to receive them charging out of the town. But they didn't do that. They are just going to stand there and take all these arrows, so that means really I should now just use all my ammo just firing at them, just to try and kill as many as we can. It doesn't really do anything at first just because of how the archery mechanics work, but after a very long time you can damage the enemy with archer fire. But they did actually not allow me to do that. They came and started attacking mostly on the east side of the town, trying to attack out towards my incoming legionaries. So we're going to quickly form up at this choke point, ready to receive the enemy. Very happy to receive them from the front because our legionaries are so strong in melee. Plus they can throw their javelins and have support from crossbows, which is already starting to damage the enemy as they come in. We've got another attack coming from a southeasterly direction. Going to try and do the same thing, setting up in a choke point, ready to receive the enemy. They send some cav against us. Our legionaries going to try and attack the cav with their javelins, but they get a little bit overzealous here, as you'll see. They just absolutely annihilate them at point blank range, sending about 20 jabs into each cavalryman. Bit of a waste, but at least it really tempts them to come in and take revenge, where they'll then lose in that melee, so that's great. You can see actually pretty much the entire enemy army is coming towards the east and southeast sides. That leaves all my guys in the westerly part of the town high and dry, so they can now just walk into the enemy settlement and start taking up positions behind the enemy, which is quite nice. And they do end up sending a few units back to face me, this unit doing a quick pirouette before coming into battle to perhaps intimidate our troops. Doesn't seem to work. Our cohort auxiliary there will be fine to hack through all those spear troops, very nice. And there's also a barricade beside them which protects their flank, so they can't be rear flanked from that position. Now I'm also using my archers to shoot over these streets to just rain arrows into the big blobs of enemy troops. As I said, it won't really do anything at first because it takes like 4 or 5 arrows to actually kill a guy. So basically after a load of volleys you'll suddenly see enemies start to die with archer fire. It's a little bit counterintuitive like that. Anyway, the grinds will now just continue on. Some of the grinds going to be a tiny bit difficult because enemy's naval crew is pretty decent in terms of being a melee unit, but there's not many of them, and we're going to soon be able to whittle them down with that arrow fire, as I said. So as long as the melee keeps going, it's going to go more and more into our favour. Here you can see arrows raining into this delicious target. So many units standing on top of each other that these arrows really going to struggle to miss anything, and it's going to start doing more and more damage as the battle goes on. We also broke through their barricade, and I sent a unit to go and engage with the enemy's admiral, who was hanging about in the centre of the town. They actually did try to rear attack me, coming right around the outside of the town with this unit of siege crew. Not going to do anything. All I had to do was turn around and kill them, so that's fine. And finally I got a few units through to actually attack the back of the enemy's main blob. Not that we really needed to. You can see all over the floor the damage that archer fire has now been doing to these enemy blobs. Very nice indeed, using these city streets to just defend ourselves, and the long range of the archers coming in super useful. Our crossbowmen not really having the same effect because they can't fire in such arcs, although I have seen the AI doing it, so I know it's possible, but in this case it didn't really happen. They did help out a little bit in this melee here, where our legionaries basically just cut down tons of enemies, fighting them from the front, taking a bit of damage themselves, but doing far, far more to the enemy's forces. You can see they actually stopped routing, but decided not to even bother with the melee and just run away, but that's not going to do them any good. And just shortly after that, the battle comes to an end. It's a heroic victory for Constans, having taken out the whole enemy navy. Very nice. And as almost a side bonus, we have also captured the settlement, let's not forget. So let's take a little look at the result. The damage on our side, really minor compared to what the enemy is going to be facing here. That whole fleet completely gone, even the admiral, which doesn't always happen when they land, because sometimes the admiral magically stays on the ship and gets away. So that was good to see. And the entire garrison of the settlement, of course, also defeated. Now, I was just checking the kills on the various units. The archers getting loads, and the legionaries fighting in the melee is getting loads as well. Very nice. Now once again I had the option here to liberate Egypt as a faction, and this time this is going to be really useful. It's perfect really, because we don't want to expand west into these giant Garamantian provinces. So these Egyptians will now just provide a buffer between us and them, and at the very least buy us time if the Garamantians do make a major move towards Alexandria. So with that done, Constans can head back to the city to increase public order, restore his own forces, and apparently receive this news that he had just in fact killed those guys, so I'm sure that was news to him. Now, back over in Greece, there's another little Roman faction, Dacia here, who once had an army, I believe, but it went and got completely annihilated by the Huns and they just never rebuilt it. And I thought, why don't we actually try and just pull these guys into our faction? I had tried this before, but they used to have really bad relations with me for whatever reason, but now they have pretty good relations thanks to the fact they've seen how we can deal with the Huns. And so because of that, they are going to be willing to confederate. So we can take a free territory here, also negotiating very cheekily to get some free money out of the deal as well. So we now have the region of Scupi. It has pretty decent buildings in it, including a skirmisher barracks at tier 3, and it's also a Roman pagan region with the relevant building as well. So that theoretically will help our public order. Not that we really can deal with the public order problems in this area. Wanted to see what those units I could recruit from the skirmisher barracks were. The main draw was the elite ballistarii, a decent crossbow unit, but it's so extremely expensive to upkeep that I realized I definitely wasn't actually going to bother recruiting any of these. There are much better value units to be had around the place. But one thing I could do is try and convert this skirmisher barracks to a legionary barracks. It would completely drain the already drained food supply in the region, but that would allow us to finally start recruiting decent troops once again into these armies, and that is basically going to be my new project for the region. I already started it here at Marcianopolis, but the food draw is so large I'd rather ruin Dardania than ruin Thracia, so we'll move the burden across. You may be invited to obey the commands of the generals of the Eastern Theatre, and they may claim that you are obligated to follow their orders, for they are consuls of Rome, but be assured that is not the case. Then what is the case? Are they not in your service? In a sense, there is a tradition of allowing them freedom from our oversight in return for the productivity they display. Whether this tradition is worth upholding is a matter of great debate, but be assured that in the end the ultimate authority in this empire sits in this chamber. I hear you. So what forces will you send to protect my borders? Well, that is... You cannot expect us to protect every mile of border. If you have problems with the Hun, or anyone for that matter, then you must trouble the aforementioned generals. So they are consuls then. So now it's time to take a look at this port assault, an experimental battle really. We just want to find out what we can do with ships alone against the enemy's garrison, especially taking into account our infinite ammo crossbow ships and just seeing how much damage they'll be able to do. So we get things started by just attacking the enemy's towers near the shoreline with our siege ships. That will clear the way for our ranged ships to come right up to the beach. And indeed, the enemy have deployed plenty of infantry around the landing points to defend against possible landings, so we can try and exploit this. After a while, though, they started to deploy their archers to come and actually fire back at the ships. And that's going to be a problem because they do outrange us by quite a large margin. These crossbow ships have a very short range, perhaps to make up for their infinite ammo. The men seem very confused about the prospect of being shot. They're not even going to look at it, just glancing over their shoulder at the incoming volleys. Luckily for them, most of these arrows seem to be missing. I guess those archers can't actually see what they're firing at, but I think archers target a point above the base of the ship rather than the ship itself. So at certain angles they basically can't hit it, and that seems to be what's happening right now. We're trying to fire back at them with siege ships. I would of course use the crossbows against them, but it just doesn't really work out like that. You'll see occasionally little red lines appearing between the ships and the archers, which that's me trying to make the ships fire at the archers or reposition themselves so that they can, but I think they just give up very easily even if it is possible to get into their range, so we have to micro them. You can see that on the beaches we've cleared out tons of the enemy's infantry. The problem was the rest of the enemy's army was not on the beach, and I just tried to tempt them over by firing random shots from the siege ships into their stuff at the back, and it seemed to kind of work. Units would come forwards. I guess they're scripted to try and advance on the things that are firing at them, so they'd come up to the beach and then get shot by crossbow bolts, so that kind of worked. But after a while we had to try a different tactic, and that was basically just putting some marines on the beach so they'd have something to fight, and that indeed worked very well. Suddenly the whole enemy army started coming down to the beach to fight these marines, but for this squad that did not prove to be very helpful because they get hit by a rear charge from those cavalry since I ordered them to move at a very inopportune time, and then they get swarmed by infantry anyway. These are only light marines, they're not actually very good, and as I learned in this battle, even one-on-one they can't defeat the enemy's pagan band, their trash spear infantry with pitchforks and sticks, which I was quite disappointed by, but that might just be the difficulty level. They've got more archers coming in here to rain fire arrows on our men. We're lucky, I guess, in that the rigging and the sails on the ship aren't flammable, so even though these fire arrows are actually going right through all of that stuff, it doesn't do anything. And it'll take a lot of them to set the ship on fire, but they will of course be killing the crew, so we'll have to again attempt to force our ships to actually fire back. They can get into range, but they sometimes just refuse to admit that. On the other landing point, I was a bit more successful in getting Marines into a safe position with their back to a wall and the enemy all charging them from the front, so that will buy me some time to use my crossbows against the enemy infantry and start thinning them out. Eventually though, I needed to land basically everything. There's no point landing one unit at a time because they'll be annihilated, so I just sent in everything else. This ship got very enthusiastic, went too far up the beach, then got sucked back by a black hole, which was also affecting our men by the looks of things. They're getting sucked back into the sea too. Luckily, none of them actually died, and they did manage to resist it eventually and run up to join the battle. I got some archers to charge there, and some infantry fighting with other Marines just waiting to be rear flanks. So some nice targets all across the board. On the other side of town, we don't really have so many men landing here actually, so it's going to be a problem for those Marines as they attempt to fight 3 units of enemy spearmen here. We've got all the siege ship crews wandering about, but they're not really going to prove very useful. We can use them though as distractions, and that's kind of what I ended up doing. The enemy army ended up kind of disengaging from all of our Marines, so I was able to capture the town, but they just went outside of the town and started wandering around, and the battle's not over until we defeat them. I wasn't confident though that my Marines actually could defeat them, so I started using the siege crews to try and lure those spearmen over to the beach so we could go back to shooting them with the crossbow ships, and a few of the crossbow crews also landed to act as a regular ranged unit. And here we kind of get a favourable looking engagement at first. We managed to get the enemy into a position where their flanks are facing my crossbow ships so we can shoot them up, and I've got a unit of foot crossbows there ready to shoot the guys coming in to the side there, although I think they didn't actually fire because they just went out of line of sight before they got their bows ready. But anyway, a big blob of enemies is now here. I've got javelins on the flank ready to throw at them. The problem of course is that our Marines can't hold against them, so even though that fight only just started, we've basically lost it already. So that's bad news, and the other enemy units who are being distracted by my siege crew make very quick work of them as well. Basically, these pagan band proved to be surprisingly effective in battle. Not that I expected our siege crew to do much against them, but I expected them to hold a little bit longer. At least we are getting those crossbow shots onto the enemy and starting to thin them out. This crossbow squad is caught in melee since all of the Marines supporting them suddenly died, and they also suddenly died, losing the half of their unit almost immediately. Not nice. Luckily, there was a saving grace in that the entire enemy army chain routed at this point, the last few units that is really, and it ends in a close victory. So it actually looked like things weren't going very well at the end there, but we've stolen the victory anyway and proven that this tactic does work, but not absolutely. Even if they know it was a trap, they will think they have won. That is no prize worthy of the loss of so many great warriors, but it is what fate has given us. If a town filled with fighters disguised as peasants will not defeat them, their greed to come to our shores at all will. While they waste their time with the business of a victor, we will raise silent sail. We will feed the ocean with the fatty blood of panicking Romans, and then the rest of them shall be trapped. They are like a thief who has broken in through the window, eaten our bread, and found themselves suddenly too large to escape. And so they try the door, and if ever there was a door to a fiery and cursed land, that was it. The doorman outside wears a crown, a sword, and knows only justice. In the final results, you can see we lost a few ships there and loads of crew as well. We did defeat the entire garrison though. I was here to sack the settlement at first, but turns out I can liberate Judea as another Roman faction, so I will do that, since that's going to be pretty annoying for the Sassanids to deal with, sitting here right in the middle of their territory. So overall, perhaps the success, although the loss of those ships is annoying because they're kind of hard to get back. They take a while to recruit these melee ships. Anyway, we'll start sailing back to Alexandria with this fleet, still at least mostly intact. But of course, we're dealing with the Sassanids, and that means every time you do something to them, they'll send 4 stacks against you, and this is no exception even on the sea. I don't know where these armies were, because we saw to the north earlier, they didn't look like there was anything there, but apparently in this very same turn, they've got all this stuff together, including their faction faction leader coming with a fleet against us. There's another fleet reinforcing. Not all that much stuff overall, but clearly, as you can see from the balance bar, they have us outmatched. So I'm going to try and run away. Luckily, they must have come from a pretty distant location to get all of these men together, because they don't pursue, and one of the fleets even goes back. So, looks like we've gotten away, with possibly losing our fleet there, but we'll have to see. They may still chase us down yet. The Huns were destroying the Illyrians just now, and now they're coming after Aurelianus. He's only out here in the middle of nowhere because he was hunting down some rebels, and these Huns are indeed attacking with an army that apparently is only equal in power to his, but we're still going to run away, and this is basically for the reason discussed in an earlier episode. There's no point fighting the Huns unless you stand to gain something immediately, because they respawn, so we might as well just run away and see if they leave, as they often do. Our Imperium levels up over that intern sequence for whatever reason, perhaps because we gained Judea, and we've got some more defamation going on. Some guy is apparently talking very negatively about Constance's second son, now posthumously governor of Thracia, so he is going to get the Constance treatment. I was trying to work out who he is. He's actually a governor, I believe, in Britannia, but we'll be getting rid of him anyway. Right, that's that sorted out. Now we can continue on with the business of the day. First, we need to go and take a look at Aurelianus, because of course we have seen the Huns now slowly creeping their way back into our line of vision, kind of creeping down, attacking Illyria, possibly thinking about attacking these rebels, and of course coming into our territory. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And the answer is going to be the usual, well, not really anything. We just want the Huns to try and get Attila to the front line so we can kill him. The rest of the armies, we might as well just leave them. I'm going to move Aurelianus to Scupi. Now that I plan to build a legionary barracks there, we want to defend it if we can. There is a Hun army nearby, as we can see there, but it's been standing there for a while, so it's probably not going to do anything. Now, back with those Sassanid fleets, we need to keep in mind that they might actually follow us down here to Alexandria and have a chance to do a port assault against it. But in my experience, at least, the AI doesn't do port assaults if there's a navy actually in the port. So because of that, I should be safe to do what I'm doing right here, which is move Constance and all of the troops down to the south. The objective is to take another settlement from the Sassanids to further secure Egypt as a province, and we're pretty safe to do this because I think down here we'll be out of the line of attack of the Sassanids. They'll probably come from the east towards Alexandria, so we can just pop down here, take a settlement, and then go back, and we'll still have the enemy choke pointed up there, and this place is almost certainly not going to be attacked, so we don't have to bother defending it, so that's all very good. So that was basically just an auto-resolve, and here's another important auto-resolve for us to deal with. Didn't expect this to be an auto-resolve, but apparently this Lacomed army in Sicily is terrible in comparison to our troops, the combined forces of Pera and Eutropius here, so we'll just storm through them. So that was much easier than expected. After that very, very long standoff, it was basically an anticlimax. So Pera showing that all you need is a little bit of confidence after all, and Eutropius probably thoroughly embarrassed by all this. So with that done, Pera's probably going to be looking for more conquest and glory. He has the Senate's powerful army and even a small fleet nearby. This gives him the opportunity to go on the offensive against the Garamantians and try to get some Roman presence back in Africa. So that's going to be his goal. Eutropius, meanwhile, going to have to replace him on guard duty. Maybe a little guard duty will teach him some courage. While the Sassanids had a large home field advantage on the new front line Constance was defining, they had a key weakness too. Most of the territories in the eastern Mediterranean were, in decades and centuries prior, long-established holdings of the Roman Empire. The Sassanids were relative new arrivals, and the nobility of the old order had not yet faded from importance. Constance was then able to exploit this, handing power to local governments rather than making himself into yet another conqueror. The only stipulation was that these new Roman states had to adopt his personal brand of Roman paganism, despite monotheistic religions being dominant. This was to be his weakness then, that the people he was trying to win over couldn't say for sure that the Sassanids hadn't offered them greater religious freedom. So that is all for now. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see Pera put into a little bit of peril and some major fighting in the deserts of Egypt in the next episode of Fields of Mars.